Hey guys, MSH Garage here bringing you another video. So I just got some new decals in for my car and I figured that I would go ahead and show you guys, at least from my perspective, how to put on decals in a car. Now you can see I've done quite a few. I've done, maybe you've seen my previous video, I've done the hood vinyl wrap on the hood. I've also done some side striping and I've done some of the decals on the windshield as well. Actually, except for the Evolution Performance one, which was done by Evolution. But I've done a lot of decals before and I figured I'd give you my own tips and hints about putting on a decal in the car to make it last and make it permanent. Not only on this one, but on my 2014 V6, I've also done decals and I've used the same tried and true method and it's produced some very good results in providing a decal that's long lasting and adheres to the car and won't come off until you want it to come off. I'm going to be putting on, as you can see down here, a Mach 1 badging for my car. Now, if you remember from my previous videos, the Mach 1 badging used to be up on the hood here. I decided to get a little more period appropriate for the 72 Mach 1 theme I'm going with this car, and I decided I would actually put it down here. Initially, I had some hesitation because I wasn't sure about maybe the clashing between the 5.0 badge and also the Mach 1 emblem, but now just putting it on here and just dry fitting and looking at it, I think it looks really good. I'm very happy with that. So I'm going to go ahead with this and also make it color matching too to the blue theme of my car. And you guys will see the reveal after I'm done taking the paper off the decal and get to see that beautiful color. So to start with, what you want to do is pick the spot on the car. Now a great tool for doing this is using your some sort of painter's tape, which easily comes off a vehicle. This is going to be your great tool right here for doing all this work. So this is really what saves you time, frustration, and aggravation, because you can basically make it the size of your decal. You can do whatever you want with it, put it on the car, and get some sort of measurement and gauge for how it's going to go on the vehicle, what it's going to look like, and what your distances are. Now another thing I like to use also is some sort of soft and pliable measuring tape here. So you obviously don't want to use one that's metal that could scratch your car or something could end up nicking your surface or anything like that. So this one doesn't have any edges to it. It's just a nice little flimsy plastic one. This is very pliable too to get over different surfaces that may not be flat on your car. Very useful tool. Now, some people really swear by, and I have seen a lot of the professional decal people, what they'll use is some sort of solvent to take off the initial layer of wax on the car. Me personally, I don't use naphtha or some of the other solvents that are out there, and some people may tell you you really have to do this. What I've held to is using, which I actually have in the car, I'm sorry, I left it in there. I use just 7% isopropyl alcohol, or basically rubbing alcohol. Now I go over this the surface area that I'm going to work on a multitude of times with the rubbing alcohol to make sure I get any of the grime, the surface stuff off the initial surface. So you see a couple of new tools appeared here that I had to go and get for this application also. One of them is one of these flat sort of plastic. You'll see it's not really that pliable. It's a nice hard surface. It's a flat edge, and also it has a nice soft velvety part right here. So when you're wiping, basically you go with this kind of motion and flatten out a decal. Now this comes in handy a lot more on decals like they're very large like this to wipe out air bubbles. However, on something like this, which doesn't have a whole lot of air bubbles and it's just an actual badging right here, it's not going to be as critical, but it'll help to rub out some of the bubbles and get it flat on the surface. So we might want to have this handy to stand by. And finally, last but not least, I also have a clay bar as well. So I'm very thorough, as I was just mentioning. I don't really use solvents to take off the layer of wax, but what I do is I do an extensive clay bar on the area to get rid of any of the surface imperfections. Then I go over a couple times with my ethanol and my isopropyl alcohol, rubbing alcohol, whatever you have laying around that's similar, and then wipe the surface down to basically clean the surface even more of imperfections, and maybe possibly, now some people may ding me out there for this, I don't know the exact chemistry. I think the isopropyl alcohol might remove a little bit of the wax, but it probably doesn't. But at least it gets the surface prepped and clear and clean for putting your decal on. That's really the most important part. Okay, so now that we have our tools laid out, now you see the first thing I did here was just sprayed the car down, and I went ahead and used my detail spray to just clean the area generally first. And then also just dry fit my decal on here to get an idea of where I want to put the decal. Now at this point, what I'm going to do is take my decal and I'm going to actually trim it. Now the key here is I'm actually going to trim it very close to the edges here. Now, not every decal is going to be guaranteed to be exactly a square shape. I don't trust that here. So I've already picked out some points which I'm going to show you. I'm going to measure to get the decal right on both sides, and then I'm going to show you what I do here. So what I end up doing is I take my scissors, and the points that I'm going to pick, and you'll see this in a second, I cut very close to the decal. And now what you're going to see here is that I'm going to use these very close spots on the decal to measure distances when I go ahead and line my decal up on the surface. So this way you're using basically effectively a straight edge to line your decal up with the car. And you'll see what I mean in just a moment. You're using something that's going to be the same on both decals on both sides to measure up your distances. So now that we've prepped our decal here, I'm going to go through and actually do a detailed prep on the surface of the car. So first thing I'm going to do is get my clay bar out. Remove those surface imperfections. No matter how much often and how much you clean your car, it's always a good idea to do this beforehand unless you just freshly washed it or waxed it and you really did a thorough job. I just like to do this regardless of the phase that I'm at. Now the other thing that I'll mention is that it's a moderately warm day. We're starting to approach fall here in Pennsylvania, and it's decently warm outside. Their recommendations is the temperatures you apply these decals in. You of course don't want it to be way too blisteringly hot, and you don't want it to be too cold. We're sitting right now here in the 60s, which is pretty much the optimal low range for applying decals. I've gone ahead and done this before. I've applied decals in 60 to 70, even probably lower temperature weather before, and then overnight it's gotten cooler, and the results have still been the same. Everything's been fine. One thing that I tried to do, but I don't have a long enough extension cord, is put a heat dish out here, some sort of small heating array, in order to just warm the surface that you're applying here. But again, we've just gotten out of summer here. It's not really that cold. I'm not that concerned about it, so I'm just going to go ahead and still do the application as is. So I'm going to spray my lubricant down like you would with clay bar typically. Make sure my clay bar's folded up, and I haven't used this one very often at all. And then just do your clay bar circular motion in the area that I'm going to be applying the decal. And I definitely oversprayed from where I need to be applying the decal, but it's better to be safe than sorry. We want to take a nice clean towel that we have, of course, and then wipe the area down as we would if we were just cleaning up the car. And then we can go ahead and do our alcohol prep on the surface. Got a nice beautiful surface area to work on. And if you're concerned about the wax that you stripped off before, you can always go back and wax over. Of course, be careful about waxing, because if you wax your decal, for example, if it's matte like this, you don't want to wax that, because then you're going to lose your matte finish. You're going to make it sheeny. So you do need to be careful when you're waxing the car also. We're ready to measure this up to put the decal on. So what makes your prep life easier also is, of course, probably picking an area and sticking the tape somewhere nearby so you have it easily accessible. I've learned this through multiple failures and successes. It's easier to have this planned out and prepped while you're trying to do this kind of install. And it's better to have more than less, so why don't we just go hog wild here and make sure that we've got enough tape to go around. Let's figure out where we're putting this. So it's probably advantageous to put one piece of tape on the decal to begin with. And another cue here, especially when you're lining decals up, now that I'm thinking about it as I'm doing this, is that use lines to the car to your advantage. They're your best friend when you're trying to line these decals up. For example, when I was doing the side striping here, I actually used the line of the car right up here to line it all the way down. Now, whether or not this line is exactly straight all the way down the car is irrelevant, because as long as it follows this line, unless the line is severely curved, it's going to match the curve of the car. And it follows it all the way down past the wheel well, and that's what I use for this. So I'm going to use a similar principle here. We've got this nice, beautiful line right here, and I really like the way it looks sitting down here. I think it gives it a very retro look. It's very similar to the position of the 72 Mach 1, albeit I'll admit the 72 Mach 1 was more on this side. I want to avoid clashing and having it too close to the 5.0 emblem, so I'm going to put it over here. And I kind of decided, I did a couple different pre-positionings. I moved it further back this way and a little closer this way. I determined I wanted it 2 inches from the door line right here. So I have to make a decision here also when taking a look at this line. What I see here is that I have the 2-inch mark on the bottom lines up exactly with this point on the edge right here. And that's what I'm going to use on the other side also. And what I'm going to do is say, this is my starting point, and 2 inches for that is going to be at the edge of the G. And we're going to be doing the same thing with the Mustang on the other side. The first thing to do is just get a basic kind of alignment. So actually we're going to let it just hang there for a second. And then once you have that, we can go through and do some detail work to make sure it's exactly where it is. Now I am working with something, even though I'm matching with this line down here, I am working a little bit against the car because I have to also make sure it's in that crease right there. But it's not a huge crease. I can make sure that I press it in there and try to line everything up as I'm adjusting things. And the great thing here with this, we can do, put a piece of tape down, and we can hold our measuring tape in place. And that's the great thing about this kind of measuring tape. And there we go. Now you know why I put all those pieces of tape down. Now I'm just confirming it here. I'm looking here. I might need to cover this up, but I know flat, I'm 2 inches from there. I'm measuring from this point right here and going over. So now we've got a great reference point here. And you just gotta make sure this stays straight though too. So we take a little piece of tape, make sure that edge stays flat. We know we're right at that tip. So I'm gonna pull this off now. I'm gonna make sure this measures up with the G. And that's why I cut so close to the G there in order to get that exactly in line. And in this case, I'm doing a little bit more freeform here. Normally I might try to measure, but because this bottom line, I cut it so close to the Mustang emblem on the, or the Mustang badging on the bottom here, I can feel the line of the car and I can feel the paper here. And really any kind of like, at this point, I'm already measuring it exactly on this side. Anything that you're getting, you know, as far as variation down there is probably gonna be imperceivable to human eye. So I'm just feeling here and feeling, am I on the line the same in both edges? I mean, and if you really wanted to, you could get really detailed and maybe you could measure from the top down here, but I feel very confident in the fact that this line feels right in line with the Mustang emblem. And now let's go ahead and tack it down for kind of a test run and we can see how it looks. That's a great thing about this tape also, is we can do this. And see how this looks from a distance. So you can see I went ahead and lined it up here. We've done 2 inches from the same point, and the only thing to really be conscientious about, remember, is use the same point on the other side, okay? Now, one thing I briefly considered, I actually just thought about out loud, I probably should have discussed this on camera, is that I thought about doing it from the 1 right here. Now, the problem with that is that if you realize you're gonna be going this direction, the other direction, right? So the M is going to be the place that you're starting at here on the other side. So the M, so instead, what I've done is I measured at the Mustang emblem, which looks like it's pretty well situated on both sides. It looks like it's, and even at that, I mean, you can get really nitpicky and try to measure out every millimeter there, but it looks like, you know, really this is the flat edge you want to be concerned with, and it looks like there's overhang on either side. It looks like there might be a little bit more on that edge, but really you're lining up with the Mustang down here as opposed to the Mach 1. This might throw things off, so I decided to go with this down here instead, and that should make for an even match on the other side when I go ahead and do that. It will make for an even match on the other side when I do that. Doing the last check here, taking a look at what I have. I'm feeling down here to make sure that I'm in line, and you guys saw from the distance, I think it lined up perfectly and looked very good. We're at the 2 inches here. And when you're satisfied with that, you're ready to apply your decal.